A federal judge now ordering the Trump administration to pay out all SNAP benefits, what used to be called food stamps. They're saying you got to pay out all those benefits for the month of November by tomorrow. Not just the partial distribution the Trump administration already said they would do, with a lot of people right now still in the dark on when they're actually going to get those benefits. What does it mean for the 42 million people who rely on the country's biggest food assistance program?
Okay, so let me just start by saying this. Right now, as you're watching this video, there are 42 million Americans who have absolutely no idea if they're getting their food benefits this month. Yeah, 42 million people. And the reason? The Trump administration and a federal judge are in the middle of a full-blown legal war over whether the government should actually, feed people. I'm not joking. This is happening right now. Here's what went down. A federal judge in Rhode Island just ordered the White House to fully fund November SNAP benefits. That's food stamps, for anyone who doesn't know. And the administration's response? They basically told the judge to pound sand. They said they're only funding 65% of it, not all of it, just 65%. And then they ran straight to the Supreme Court to try and block the judge's order entirely. Can you believe this? So we've got millions of families sitting there right now, watching their bank accounts, wondering if they're going to have enough money to buy groceries this week. And meanwhile, the Department of Justice is filing emergency court documents, calling the judge's ruling a mockery of the separation of powers. Like, come on, you're really pulling the separation of powers card over food stamps? But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Much needed relief could soon be on the way to millions of Americans struggling to put food on the table. A federal judge has ordered the Trump administration to fully fund SNAP benefits by today. ABC's Perry Russum is in Washington.
A federal judge is ordering the Trump administration to fully distribute SNAP benefits by today, accusing the administration of withholding federal food assistance for political reasons. Judge John McConnell says people have gone without for too long. Not making payments to them for even another day is simply unacceptable. The Department of Justice today asking a higher court to immediately halt the ruling. The DOJ argues complying with the court's order does more harm to the government than SNAP recipients. Vice President J.D. Vance calling the judge's ruling absurd.
In the midst of a shutdown, we can't have a federal court telling the president how he has to triage the situation.
SNAP benefits serve 1 in 8 Americans, 42 million people. It's the largest food assistance program in the country. Long lines at food banks across the U.S., like this one in New Jersey.
The problem is this is not going to be sustainable if this shutdown goes on for very long.
Janelle Daniels is a SNAP recipient. Her mother drove with her to the food bank.
I'm so thankful that she was able to come down and assist me, because it's a lot of people who don't have the assistance. And it's hard to try to depend on other people to help you.
But here's where it gets even crazier. Trump himself posted on social media, he couldn't help himself, saying he won't release the full funding until, and I'm paraphrasing here, radical left Democrats open up government, which they can easily do, and not before. So now SNAP benefits are being held hostage in some kind of weird political standoff that nobody asked for. And look, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, well, maybe there's fraud in the program. Maybe the administration has a point. And okay, fair, there is fraud. We'll get into that. The Government Accountability Office just dropped a report showing at least $320 million in stolen SNAP benefits last month alone. People getting benefits in 6 different states at the same time. Wild stuff. But here's the thing. Cutting off food for 42 million people because you found some fraud? That's like burning down your house because you saw a spider. It doesn't make sense. And more importantly, it's causing absolute chaos right now. State officials are scrambling. Food banks don't know what to tell people. Families are panicking. And the White House, they're in the middle of a constitutional crisis over whether a judge can tell them to follow the law. This is wild. So in this video, we're going to break down exactly what's happening, how we got here, why this judge is so angry, what Trump's administration is actually arguing, and most importantly, what happens next. Because this story is moving fast, and honestly, it's one of the most insane things I've seen in a while. The Judge John McConnell, literally said in court, and this is a direct quote, "It's likely SNAP recipients are hungry as we sit here." Like he's sitting there in his courtroom, looking at government lawyers, and he's basically saying people are starving right now, while you're playing legal games. That's not normal. Federal judges don't usually talk like that. And the craziest part? This isn't even about a government shutdown anymore. Like, yeah, there's shutdown drama happening too, but this is separate. The administration just decided on their own that they weren't going to fund the full amount. They just made that call. No vote, no law. They just said, nah, we're only doing 65% this month. The DOJ is now arguing that the judge's order is unprecedented, that it crosses a line, that it interferes with executive power. But like the executive power to not feed people, is that really the hill you want to die on? And Trump's playing hardball. He's treating SNAP benefits like a bargaining chip. Like you want people to eat? Well then Democrats better give me what I want first. That's essentially what he's saying, and it's causing absolute mayhem. The timing of all this couldn't be worse. We're heading into the holiday season. Thanksgiving is literally weeks away, and millions of families are sitting there doing the math, trying to figure out how they're going to afford a turkey, or even just basic groceries if their benefits get slashed by 35%. And the media is going crazy over this. It's all over Twitter. It's on every news channel. Everyone's got an opinion. Some people are saying the judge is a hero for standing up to the administration. Other people are saying he's overstepping, and judges shouldn't be able to force spending decisions. It's become this massive political flashpoint. So buckle up, because this story has everything. Court battles, corruption allegations, millions of families in limbo, constitutional arguments, and a president who's basically saying, I don't care what a judge says, I'm doing it my way. Let's get into it. All right, so let's actually explain what's going on here. Because I know this sounds confusing. Like, how did we get to a point where the government is arguing in court about whether to feed people? It's honestly hard to wrap your head around. Here's the timeline. Pay attention, because this moves fast. Back in early November, the Trump administration announced they were only going to fund 65% of November's SNAP benefits. Not because of a budget issue, not because Congress told them to. They just decided. The reasoning? They're claiming the program is riddled with fraud and they need to crack down before releasing more money. Now this immediately caused panic. States started freaking out, food banks started freaking out, advocacy groups started filing lawsuits left and right, and that's when Judge John McConnell in Rhode Island stepped in on November 7th. So like just a couple days ago, Judge McConnell issued an order. He told the administration, you have to fund the full amount, all of it, 100%, no games. He said the partial funding plan was illegal and that SNAP recipients were facing immediate harm. And like I mentioned earlier, he literally said in court, it's likely SNAP recipients are hungry as we sit here. That's a federal judge basically calling out the administration for starving people. So what does the administration do? They appeal. Immediately, the Department of Justice files an emergency brief saying the judge's order is an unprecedented injunction that makes a mockery of the separation of powers. They're arguing that no judge has the authority to tell the executive branch how to distribute benefits, that it's a matter of executive discretion. And then they ran to the Supreme Court, because of course they did. They filed an emergency application asking the Supreme Court to block the judge's order while they fight it out in the lower courts. As of right now, we're still waiting to see what the Supreme Court does. But here's where it gets messy, because Trump isn't just sitting back and letting the lawyers handle it. Oh no, he's out there on social media, posting about it, making it clear that this is part of a bigger political fight. He said, and again this was cited in court proceedings, that he won't release the additional funds until radical left Democrats open up government. So he's tying SNAP benefits to whatever shutdown drama is happening in Congress right now. Can you believe this? Like, we're talking about food for 42 million people, and it's being used as a political weapon. Now, let's talk about the fraud thing, because the administration isn't completely making this up. There is fraud in the SNAP program. The Government Accountability Office just released a report showing that at least $320 million in benefits were stolen last month. People are scamming the system. There are cases of recipients getting benefits in 6 different states at the same time. There are organized fraud rings stealing EBT card information and draining accounts. This is real, and honestly, it's a problem that needs to be fixed. But here's the issue. Cutting off funding to the entire program because of fraud is not how you fix it. That's like saying, well, some people cheat on their taxes, so let's just shut down the IRS and stop collecting taxes altogether. It doesn't make sense. And more importantly, the people who are getting hurt right now aren't the fraudsters. The fraudsters already got their money. They're fine. The people who are getting hurt are the 42 million legitimate recipients who are sitting there wondering if they're going to be able to feed their kids this month. State officials are losing their minds right now. They don't know how to plan. They don't know what to tell people. Some states are trying to figure out if they can cover the shortfall with their own money, but most can't afford it. Food banks are getting slammed with requests because people are panicking. and the White House is just playing legal games. The DOJ's argument is that the judge overstepped, that he doesn't have the authority to force the executive branch to spend money. They're saying this sets a dangerous precedent where any judge can just order the government to fund programs however they want. And okay, I get that argument from a legal standpoint, but also, come on, we're talking about food stamps, not some abstract policy debate. Judge McConnell clearly didn't care about the legal niceties. He looked at the situation and said, people are hungry. This is causing immediate harm. I'm issuing an order. And honestly, good for him, because someone needed to step in. But now we're in this bizarre situation where the administration is defying a court order and daring the judge to do something about it. They're only funding 65%. The judge said fund 100%. And they're just not doing it. They're appealing and stalling and hoping the Supreme Court bails them out. And Trump is making it worse by tying this to the shutdown fight. Because now it's not just about SNAP. It's about the whole government funding mess. It's about political leverage. It's about who blinks first. This is chaos. Pure chaos. And the thing that gets me is how unnecessary all of this is. Like, if the administration is genuinely concerned about fraud, there are ways to address that. Audit the program. Tighten eligibility requirements. Go after the people committing fraud. Install better security on EBT cards. Work with states to crack down on the fraud rings. But cutting off funding to the entire program? That's not a fraud prevention strategy. That's just cruelty. And let's be real about who this hurts. SNAP recipients are some of the most vulnerable people in the country. We're talking about low-income families, kids, elderly people, people with disabilities, single parents working 2 jobs and still barely making ends meet. These are not people who have a backup plan if their benefits get cut. They're living paycheck to paycheck, or worse. There's data showing that SNAP has direct economic impacts beyond just the recipients. When people can't buy food, local businesses suffer. Grocery stores see less traffic. Farmers markets lose customers. Schools see more kids coming in hungry, which affects their ability to learn. Food banks get overwhelmed because they become the last resort. It creates a ripple effect through entire communities. And all of this is happening right before the holidays. Thanksgiving is coming up. Christmas is around the corner. And millions of families have no idea if they're going to have enough money to put food on the table. They're already stressed about presents and travel and all the normal holiday stuff. Now they have to worry about whether they can afford groceries. That's messed up. Meanwhile, the White House and the DOJ are arguing about the separation of powers, about executive discretion, about whether a judge has the authority to issue this kind of order. And look, those are important legal questions. I get it. Constitutional law matters. The balance of powers matters. But maybe, just maybe, we could figure out those questions after we make sure 42 million people aren't going hungry. Just a thought. The political optics of this are terrible too. Like, putting aside the human cost for a second, this just looks bad. The administration is coming across as heartless. They're fighting a judge who's literally saying people are hungry. They're holding food assistance hostage for political gain. That's not a good look. And Democrats are having a field day with this. They're calling it cruel. They're calling it inhumane. They're holding press conferences and going on TV and blasting the administration for putting politics over people. And honestly, it's hard to argue with them on this one. So that's where we are. A federal judge saying fund the program. The administration saying, nah, we're only doing 65%. Trump saying, I'm not budging until Democrats give me what I want. The Supreme Court sitting there deciding what to do. And 42 million people stuck in the middle, wondering what the hell is going on. This is peak dysfunction. And honestly, it's embarrassing. Like, this is the United States of America. We're supposed to be the richest country in the world. And we can't figure out how to feed people without turning it into a constitutional crisis? Come on. Okay, so let's break this down into what actually matters. Because there's a lot of legal jargon and political theater here. But at the end of the day, this story comes down to a few key things. First, and this is the most important part, 42 million people are caught in the middle of a political fight that has nothing to do with them. These are people who rely on SNAP to feed their families. And right now, they have no idea if they're getting their full benefits this month. That's not okay. I don't care what your politics are. That's just not okay. Second, the Trump administration is treating SNAP like a bargaining chip. They're using it as leverage in whatever fight they're having with Democrats over the government shutdown. Trump literally said he's not releasing the funds until Democrats open up government. So now food assistance is tied to political negotiations. And that's insane, because food assistance shouldn't be political. It's not a Republican issue or a Democrat issue. It's a basic human needs issue. Third, the fraud argument is being used as cover. Yes, there's fraud in the program. $320 million worth, according to the latest report. And yeah, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of taxpayer dollars going to criminals instead of people who actually need help. But the solution to fraud isn't to cut off funding to everyone. The solution is to go after the people committing fraud, tighten the system, add more safeguards, prosecute the fraud rings. But don't punish 42 million people because some people are gaming the system. And fourth, we're watching a constitutional crisis play out in real time. A federal judge issued an order. The administration is defying that order. They're appealing to the Supreme Court. And the whole thing raises questions about what happens when the executive branch just decides it's not going to follow a court ruling. That's not normal. That's not how this is supposed to work. We have 3 branches of government for a reason. Checks and balances exist for a reason. And when one branch just ignores another branch, that's a problem. So what happens next? Honestly, it's hard to say. The Supreme Court could rule any day now. They could side with the administration and say the judge overstepped. They could say that judges don't have the authority to force spending decisions and that this is a matter for the executive branch to decide. Or they could side with the judge and force the administration to fund the full amount. They could say that when people are facing immediate harm, courts have the power to step in. Or they could punt and send it back to the lower courts for more arguments, which would just drag this out even longer. In the meantime, states are scrambling. Some states are trying to figure out if they can cover the shortfall with their own funds. A few governors have already announced they're going to try to make up the difference, at least temporarily. But most states don't have that kind of money just lying around. State budgets are tight. They've got their own programs to fund. They can't just pull hundreds of millions of dollars out of thin air to cover a federal shortfall. So they're stuck waiting, just like everyone else. Food banks are preparing for the worst. They're stocking up. They're reaching out to donors. They're organizing emergency fundraising drives. They're trying to figure out how to handle the surge of people who are going to show up looking for help if the benefits don't come through. And food banks are already stretched thin. They've been dealing with increased demand since the pandemic. They don't have unlimited resources. If millions of people suddenly lose a chunk of their food assistance, food banks are going to be overwhelmed. And families are panicking. They're checking their EBT cards every day, hoping to see the full amount deposited. They're making plans for what to do if the money doesn't show up. They're cutting back on everything else just to make sure they have enough for food. They're skipping bills. They're putting off medical appointments. They're doing whatever they can to stretch every dollar. Because when you're living on the edge, a 35% cut in food assistance isn't just inconvenient, it's catastrophic. This is real life consequences. This isn't just a legal debate or a political fight. This is people's lives. This is kids going to bed hungry. This is parents skipping meals so their children can eat. This is elderly people on fixed incomes trying to decide between food and medicine. This is disabled people who can't work, wondering how they're going to survive. And the thing that really gets me is how avoidable all of this was. The administration didn't have to do this. They could have fully funded SNAP and then worked on addressing fraud separately. They could have launched investigations. They could have worked with Congress to pass reforms. They could have increased enforcement. They could have done literally anything other than what they did. But instead, they chose chaos. They chose to pick a fight with the federal judge. They chose to use food assistance as a political weapon. They chose to put millions of people in limbo. And now we're here. The DOJ is arguing that this is about executive power, that the judge doesn't have the authority to tell them how to spend money, that this is a fundamental question about the separation of powers and whether courts can interfere with executive decisions. And okay, fine, that's a legal argument. I understand the principle they're defending, but it's also a smokescreen, because at the end of the day, this isn't really about executive power or constitutional law. It's about whether the administration wants to fully fund SNAP or not. And clearly they don't. Judge McConnell saw through that. That's why he issued his order. He looked at the situation and said, this is causing immediate harm. People are going hungry. The law requires full funding. I'm stepping in. He didn't buy the administration's arguments. He didn't think the fraud issue justified cutting benefits. He saw it for what it was, a political stunt. And he called it out. And the administration's response was basically, you can't tell us what to do. We're the executive branch. We have discretion. And yeah, the executive branch does have a lot of discretion in how they implement programs, but there are limits. And when a judge says you're breaking the law and hurting people, you can't just ignore that. So now we wait for the Supreme Court. We wait to see if the administration blinks. We wait to see if Democrats give Trump whatever he's asking for in exchange for releasing the funds. We wait to see if some kind of deal gets worked out behind the scenes. And while we wait, 42 million people are in limbo. This story matters for a bunch of reasons. Obviously, it matters because it directly affects millions of people's ability to eat, but it also matters because it shows how broken our system is right now. We've got a president who's willing to hold food assistance hostage. We've got a DOJ that's spending time arguing about the separation of powers instead of making sure people are fed. We've got a Congress that can't get its act together to pass basic funding bills. We've got courts that are being forced to step in and referee political fights. It's dysfunction on top of dysfunction, and it's all happening during Trump's second term. Which means this is the kind of thing voters are going to remember when other elections roll around. Because voters are watching this. They're seeing how the administration handles a crisis. They're seeing who fights for what. They're seeing which politicians are willing to stand up for vulnerable people and which ones are willing to use them as pawns. And they're going to remember, public opinion on this is already shifting. Polls show that people don't like seeing food assistance used as a political tool. They don't like the chaos. They don't like the uncertainty. Even people who generally support Trump and his policies are uncomfortable with this because most people, regardless of their politics, think that feeding hungry people should be a priority. It's just basic human decency. The broader issue here is about trust. Do people trust the government to handle basic functions? Do people trust the administration to look out for vulnerable people? Do people trust the courts to hold everyone accountable? Do people trust politicians to put people over politics? Right now, the answer seems to be no, and this snap fight is a perfect example of why, when the government can't even figure out how to distribute food assistance without it turning into a constitutional crisis, people lose faith in the whole system. So here's the bottom line. This is a crisis that didn't need to happen. It's a political fight that's hurting real people. It's a legal battle that raises serious questions about how our government functions. And it's all playing out right now, in real time, with millions of families watching and waiting and hoping they're going to be able to eat this month. And honestly, that's just sad. It's sad that we're here. It's sad that food assistance has become a political football. It's sad that a federal judge had to step in and basically beg the administration to feed people. It's sad that we live in a country where 42 million people need food assistance in the first place, and then we can't even deliver it without drama. We're better than this, or at least we should be. So keep your eyes on this story, because it's not over. The Supreme Court is going to rule. The administration is going to keep fighting. Congress is going to keep squabbling, and 42 million people are going to keep waiting. And when this is all said and done, somebody's going to have to answer for this mess, because you can't just hold food assistance hostage and expect there to be no consequences. This is the kind of thing that defines an administration, not the big policy wins or the legislative victories, but how you treat the most vulnerable people when nobody's looking. And right now, the Trump administration is failing that test. All right, that's it for this video. If this kind of political chaos keeps you up at night, well, buckle up, because there's a lot more where this came from. The dysfunction isn't going anywhere. The fights aren't stopping, and we're going to keep covering it all. So make sure you're subscribed, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one, where hopefully we'll have some answers about whether 42 million people are going to eat this month. Wild times.